Alright guys, welcome to your video lecture all about sustainable farming. So we've got two sets of notes to do today. The first one is about soil and alternative farming methods. The second is about agroecology, which is super awesome and something I'm excited to introduce you to. These are notes we've already been through. Let me click through them. We learned yesterday all about traditional farming and the problems with it, how we overcome them, and we talked about GMOs as well. We watched this GMO video in class, and let me tell you, it was pretty informative, so it's definitely something to take some time and watch. You can find the link under the traditional farming notes under additional videos. It's definitely worth a watch just to educate yourself a little bit more about genetically modified organisms. But other ways that we can help the lithosphere. So we learned that we're causing some problems to it. We're taking the nutrients out of the soil. We're also seeing a lot of erosion, and we are adding a lot of chemicals that aren't normally there. One of the things that we do, or some ways that we can conserve this soil and help alleviate the issues or decrease the damage done by traditional farming, is to employ some soil conservation techniques. We're going to learn about 5 of them today. So if you are online doing your notes today, I would like you to, in the best of your abilities, either post a picture, paste it into your notes for each of these types, or try to draw it with the drawing feature of Google Docs. You do need to include any words that are handwritten here into your notes. That's important. Some of you are skipping notes. I'm taking off credit if you're not completing all of the notes, so definitely take some time and do it. First thing first, we've already talked about topography way back at the beginning of the year in August. Just a reminder, topography is the arrangement of physical features of an area. That can mean lakes, it can mean mountains, it can mean valleys, it can mean hills, it can mean depressions, it can mean how far or how close you are to sea level. That's something that we have to fight against when we think about soil conservation, because it is a lot easier for soil to erode on a hill than it is flat land. So topography, or the physical features of your area, is important. One of the very first ways that farmers have tried to conserve soil with is called contour plowing. Contour plowing is plowing across a hill rather than up and down. So instead of going up and down with my fields, we are going across it and in circles like this. This helps to decrease erosion. The plant roots stabilize the soil. We don't have blank areas or the space in between crops going straight down, which would make kind of like a river, if you can imagine, or a valley for the water to flow down. So those roots are really helping to preserve the soil and our water as well. One of the reasons we don't want water going down our hill is because it picks up and moves the soil with it. We don't want that. We want our soil to stay in the same place that it is. Erosion is typically bad. If we erode all of our topsoil, we learned that eventually our fields will become rock and dust. That's what happened in the Dust Bowl, and that's why we learned some soil conservation techniques like contour plowing. Here's an artist's rendition of what contour plowing might look like. It doesn't always look like circles around a hill. Sometimes it can mean squiggly lines or fields. It's just planting in whatever way, or planting your farm in whatever way to decrease soil erosion. Our second type of soil conservation method here is, I'm going to do it like this so you can see all the words. A soil conservation technique is called strip farming. This is where we plant different crops in alternating strips along contours. So instead of just planting one type of crop, which we learned about is called monoculture, we're planting multiple in the same field. This is important because it helps to increase diversity. We said that leads to lots of soil nutrition, helps to decrease pest and weed issues, but not only that, it helps to ensure that part of the field is covered when others are not. You can see in my picture right here, we have a farmed soil right here, a harvested area, but we've also got right here another crop that is helping to hold that soil in. That can help decrease the erosion of soil as well. Not only that, again, it helps to return some of the nutrients into the soil. Our third method is called terracing. This isn't something new. I told you the ancient people of Latin America, like the Inca and the Maya, they used terracing to cultivate crops on their mountainous regions. Terracing is creating little spaces. Terracing is creating little spaces along the land right here so that we can farm this right here. If we had left it the way it would be too steep, too downhill to be able to farm. We'd have too much runoff. So this is the shaping of the land to create leveled shelves of earth to hold the water and the soil. Kind of like a terrace on a building, it's got different levels. Let's see what that says there. Edges are planted with soil, anchoring plants. There we go. Pretty awesome. And I think it is even more awesome that the ancient people had figured this out before we had the technology that we do now. So this isn't something new. It's something that's been around for a while, but it's definitely a new idea in the United States. Our next type of soil conservation is called cover crops. We talked about these before. Rye, alfalfa, or clover can be planted immediately after harvesting a piece of cropland to hold and protect the soil. We talked about that. When we have plants over our soil, it decreases erosion because the plants are holding the soil in place with their roots. You can see here we had corn that was harvested, and then a farmer came back and planted, I'm not sure what this looks like, ryegrass. It doesn't look like alfalfa or clover. Ryegrass grass along the soil to help hold that soil in along the fields. The last thing that we can do to help preserve or conserve our soil is organic farming. This is the avoidance of using chemicals so soil is not contaminated. So this isn't using pesticides or herbicides. They use different chemicals to try and get rid of the pests and the weeds. I've got a video right here about organic farming. I'll link it so that you can watch it as well. So that was the end of our first page of notes. Remember, you're responsible for either putting a picture of this type of soil conservation or using the drawing feature of Google Slides to put in your different types of soil conservation here. If you have a notebook, you are to be doing these in the notebook. It is a lot easier and it makes sure that our notes are in one place. Our second set of notes that we're doing today is called Agroecology. This is so awesome, something that's definitely new to you guys. I don't think you know it, but agroecology is viewing agriculture or farming as ecosystems instead of industrialized beings like they are. So thinking about it in more terms of what happens naturally. How can I recreate what happens naturally in the environment to benefit me and to grow my crops? An example of this would be managing pests through internal regulating mechanisms. So if I have an issue with bugs, maybe I release my chickens who are hungry into my fields and I let them eat the bugs. And then the bugs are gone and the chickens are fed and everybody's happy. So this is pretty awesome. It's pretty new too, so it's definitely not a way we farm, definitely not around here. But it's something I want to get you guys thinking about and educated about because it's very awesome and it solves a lot of the issues that we're seeing with traditional farming. So there are 4 kind of sections of agroecology. We're going to talk about them and then we're going to try to identify them in a reading and then we'll be done for the day. So the first part is called efficiency. So what is it? This is when we recycle or reuse resources whenever possible. Some example is composting, which recycles organic matter. So my waste isn't waste anymore, it's fertilizer. How can you be efficient in your everyday life? We're talking about like what could you do? Could you start composting? One of the things my grandma has done for as long as I can remember is she puts her banana peels on her rose bushes. She says, and it's true, they make her roses bloom better. That's because we're returning the organic material of the banana peel back into the soil. It is decomposed and those nutrients are returned right back to those roots. Another section of agroecology is self-sufficiency. So this is when we try to minimally input beyond what nature provides. So that means that I want to try and farm as close to nature as I can. How can I not modify my plants? How can I not help them along? So self-sustaining is something that we talk about in our own lives. You want to be self-sustainable one day, meaning that you live on your own, you no longer live with your parents. You have your own money, you have your own job. The same thing can kind of be thought of with our plants here. We want our plants to grow on our own. We don't want to water them. One example here is dryland farming, which relies exclusively on rainwater. So instead of a farmer going out and irrigating his crops like we normally see, they rely solely on rainwater to water their crops. Our example, I need you to fill this out too. How can you be self-sufficient in everyday life? So what is something that you might be able to do? Diversity is our next aspect of agroecology. We talked about this in depth. The more diverse my area is, generally the healthier the ecosystem. A farm is not an industry, it's an ecosystem. And the more diversity we put into this ecosystem, the better off it's going to be. So we want to add variety to our farms. Remember, we want to step away from the monoculture and go more towards polyculture. That means that we have different species on the same farm. So we not only have corn, but we have soybeans and we have eggplants, and maybe we even have some wildlife in there like chickens and pigs and cows. Each species is going to benefit from the interactions between each other, and it's going to start looking a lot more like an ecosystem, and again, less like a factory. Examples here are our crop rotations, which we learned about yesterday, and which control pests, and strip farming, which we talked about just a second ago. My question for you, what can you do to increase the diversity in your own life? I know many of you aren't farmers, so you can think of this as a life perspective, maybe. Some ways that you could be more diverse in your everyday life, if we're stepping away from farming and just thinking about your life in general. Maybe you start listening to music that you've never listened to before. Say you've never really been a folky music person, but you try out one of their songs. Maybe you try new food. Many of you are really picky eaters. Perhaps you could try a carrot. I don't know. Maybe some Brussels sprouts. And our last aspect of agroecology, it's resilience. So what is it? It's the ability to withstand or recover from shock, like floods, hurricanes, droughts, etc. So we want our farms to be really resilient. We don't want the hurricane that might come in October to destroy our cropland, because if we don't have crops and we don't have food, we're going to starve, right? So it's really important that our farms are resilient. Examples of this, contour farming is really going to help increase the resiliency of our farm because we are decreasing that erosion during heavy storms. How can you be resilient in your everyday life? So you can think of it from a farming perspective. What are some things we could do to be resilient? We could plant crops that are resistant to droughts or bugs. You could think about it from your own lifestyle. What could you do to be more resilient? And then lastly, we've got a reading, and it asks you in your notes to please pick out the examples of each of those 4 aspects of agroecology in the reading. So the duck, rice, and fish case study. I should have practiced the name. Toyoko Furuno, a Japanese farmer, developed a system for growing rice that mimics natural systems. He puts ducks in his paddies, which are flooded parcels of land used to grow rice, to eat weeds and insects. The ducks' waste produce nutrients in the water that the crops can use. This means that the farmers who have mimicked Furuno's system can save money because they don't need pesticides or fertilizers typically used to grow rice. They also earn extra money by selling duck meat and duck eggs. Furuno's system also uses fish in the paddies, which become another source of income. Industrial rice farmers have discontinued this practice because the insecticides they used in their growing system would kill their fish. The furrow system yields 20% more rice than the conventional system, which grows rice exclusively. So this right here, this duck, rice, and fish case study, we are actually looking deeper into agriculture. It's called aquaculture, but we'll have to talk about that another day. For the remaining parts, you need to pick out the 4 types of agroecology in this story. Good luck!